Introduction to Esoteric Healing, a lecture by Dr. Douglas Baker. This excellent lecture is structured around 11 basic maxims of esoteric healing and answers such questions as: what is the real nature of disease? What makes a healer? Where does the healing energy come from? What is the nature of this energy? And how does this energy act on the dis-ease of the individual to restore health? The importance of magnetic phenomena, especially that most magnetic quality, love, is also discussed, as are many other healing methods like color and sound. Whether you are an established healer, learning the art of esoteric healing, work in the health service, or some other healing center, or are just interested in healing, this lecture will be of great value to you.
I felt today that you need the introductory course in esoteric healing. From our studies of the seven rays, of course, you understand that no matter what rays you have in your makeup, all of us reflect something of the second ray of this solar system. That is the ray of the solar logos. We live within his body, within him, and the extent to which we cooperate with him governs in great measure our own unfoldment. If you swim against the stream, you are wasting time, wasting a life, and you are involving yourself in heavy karma. So we learn to swim with the stream. We learn to obey the laws of nature. We learn to confine ourselves to his intent. And part of his intent is to express the second ray of love wisdom, the ray of teaching and healing. And therefore, whilst we readily embrace the concept that we should teach all those that come into the orbit of our consciousness, it's not easy to understand why it is necessary for all of us also to be able to heal. In a great measure, when we do teach, we eliminate ignorance. And ignorance is the main cause of man's disease or illnesses, is ignorance. And so when we teach, we dispel ignorance and we commence the act of healing. There is a fond belief in esoteric circles that all you need do is to love, and that the masters will do everything else for you. Well, the masters obey the law of economy, and they don't express their energies wastefully. They like to express their energies as efficiently as possible, just as certainly as you would. When you waste energy, it's very frustrating, it's lowering to the whole tone of your outlook, and so on. Well, the masters like to heal through outposts, through somebody close to the patient. In this way, when the master passes his energy through the healer, the energy becomes human and very applicable to disease. And the energy that he passes through an adequate healer is less wasteful, much less wasteful, than if he was to try and heal direct from a distance. And so we always support the idea of healing groups, and we support the idea of people being equipped to heal, so that they don't waste the healing energies. Whether they come from the master or the logos makes no difference. And a lot of energy is wasted in so-called acts of healing, where the healer hasn't the faintest idea where he should apply his energy, and thus it is dissipated. And so I always begin my talks on healing with the basic principles of the healing art. Healing was always related to the high priest in ancient days. Later it became more the field of the medicine man. Medicine man was a high priest who was adapted to healing. And the basic concept of healing is that there is energy available for healing. There are energy reservoirs. The best example of energy reservoirs that we know about are those which are controlled by a Nirmanakaya. The Nirmanakaya has many outstanding features and qualities. He has been through the whole system of Earth's evolution. He has ascended as a master. He has usually passed around higher than that known to humans. So when we think of Plato, we think of a fifth rounder, whereas we, the human kingdom, are in the fourth round. When we think of the Buddha, we think of a sixth rounder. And these are Nirmanakayas. They're always with us, but occasionally they near edge to the earth and to the earth's scheme, and may adopt a group through an individual in order to express the energies that they have appended to them. And the Nirmanakaya has a reservoir of fire energy, of which he is the jealous guardian. He is the guardian of that energy. He will not use it unless it is for the spiritual evolution of man. He will not use that energy to reinforce old, wrong, worn-out, concrete, entrenched methods. He will only use that energy to open new fields, to pour it into new expressions, and the maintenance of those new expressions of his divinity. And so the first proposition that we make with regard to the equipment of a healer is that he should understand that energy follows thought. Energy follows thought. Probably the most important maxim that we're concerned with in the early stages of our spiritual unfoldment. The slow but progressive and inexorable understanding that somehow or the other the direction of energy is connected or concerned with our thinking processes. It's as if we have a garden to water, and the garden has a hose, and man's mind is a hosing mechanism, which, thoroughly trained, can hose the energy available to him to the appropriate site or target. Energy follows thought. Well, nature has used this principle very fully in man. For man, like most creatures, has a nervous system. The nervous system is a system of communication. It is basically an electrical functioning, but far more basically it is an instrument of fire, the nervous system. It expresses fire. You have heard me in my talk on signposts on the path say how the phenomenon of fire becomes a reality. We begin to appreciate how increased fire is flowing through us, and how these fire manifestations show as signposts on the path of unfoldment. Now, the nervous system's function is dual, and because it is dual, it is a lovely instrument of expression for the solar logos, because the ray of love wisdom is dual. It is love energy wisely applied. It is wisdom energy lovingly applied. And its main sign of the zodiac that it expresses itself through is the duad of Gemini. And the nervous system is dual in that it is sensory and it is motor. It is able to apprehend changes in the environment, and it is able to take action with regard to those changes in the environment. So we talk about the active nervous system or motor nervous system or efferent nervous system. All of them are interchangeable, those expressions. And we also talk about the sensory, receptive, afferent nervous system, which receives information. Now, the way in which fire is linked, the reservoirs of fire are linked to the nervous system, is through the apprehension of sensory experience and action that results in what we call pain, action that results from pain. If we hurt ourselves, we feel pain in the area. If we have jammed our fingers in the door, our afferent nervous system tells us that there is tissue damage in our fingers, and we feel the pain. Now, whilst we may have all sorts of aesthetic attitudes towards pain, the immediate practical result of feeling the pain where the tissue is damaged in our fingers is to direct our thoughts to that area. Our thoughts are directed to the site of the pain. And if you have understood what I have just been saying, then energies follow thought. And our energy reservoirs pour themselves outwards, down through the nervous system, not so much through the nerves, but through the nadis that wind themselves around the nerves. And that is the way in which we link our earlier learning to the practical subject of things like healing. And so I draw a nerve here, and I show how that nerve is directed towards its site of expression, say the fingertip, which has just been jammed in the door, and wrapped around the nervous system, and nerves in particular, are the nadis, and the nadis are the carriers of prana. The nadis are the carriers of prana. We see that they adopt in their structure the kind of movement for energy which we have already referred to as forward motion, spiraling cyclic motion, and rotary motion. And so down the nadis there pours the energies that can help the tissues to repair themselves. Energy follows thought. We think of the site of the pain, the energy flows down the nadis accompanying the nerves, and the appropriate energies flow into that region, and healing begins immediately. We will see again and again in esoteric healing that these things are important. It's so very easy to carry out fundamental healing activities, but wait till you get really sick people that the medical profession has rejected. They cannot do anything more for them, and they will come your way very frequently. And it's when they come your way that the basis of this talk today should be remembered, that you have access to fire, you have access to healing energies, and they are the things that can transform sick patients who have been discarded by orthodox medicine. Not so much the drugs and the scalpels and so on, but energies. So that's the first thing to remember, that energy follows thought. Sometime or the other, we will take that up as an individual heading, energy follows thought, and we will deal with it. The second maxim is that in esoteric healing, we find restoration of symmetry to the inner bodies. Healing, which is esoteric, is directed towards inner structures where the cause of the disease lie. Causes of the disease lie inwardly. We direct our energies inwardly to the cause, and as that area, that inner area, repairs itself, so the healing reflects itself outwardly, eventually reaching the physical body. So our second proposition here is that healing, esoteric healing, restores symmetry to the inner bodies where it is most needed. What on earth is the use of repairing a wound outwardly, quickly, with penicillin powder, if the site of the infection, the infecting organism, is already deep within you? That infection will burst out in some other area. So we say, restore symmetry to the inner bodies first, and all else will be added later, and that is very important. Thirdly, the third maxim, do not be too concerned about the organ that is involved. Do not be too concerned about the actual organ involved. Rather seek to find the energy reservoirs closest to the organ, which we call chakras. Try and locate the appropriate chakra. Obviously, if you have a site of disease on the upper arm, then the nearest chakras to the upper arm are beneath the arm in the axilla. There's a large chakra. It's still a minor center compared to the major ones in the trunk, but there is a chakra there, and there is another chakra in the cubital fossa. By that we mean the soft part on the inner side of the elbow. There's a chakra there, and these areas need to be covered in esoteric healing. If we use magnetic fields, we place a solenoid there that ensures an interplay of energy between the North Pole chakra, which is the axilla, and the South Pole chakra, which is the cubital fossa. And so the energy is made to flow through this region. You don't have to do anything else. You can keep the wound clean or whatever is involved clean, but keep energy flowing through this region. And so we use oscillating magnetic fields, fields that are one moment headed towards the North Pole and the next split second to the South Pole. And so the oscillation helps the flow of energy, and if the tissues require an energy uptake, they have it available to them. Then there is the third maxim. We've dealt with the third maxim. Heal the related chakra and not the organ itself. And you will find that we will give quite a lot of attention to the matter of correlations. The ray, the chakra, the endocrine gland, the planet, the sign of the zodiac, and so on. And therefore, for the enlightened healer, the person's horoscope should be there all the time. The horoscope will indicate what major chakras, what major reservoirs of energy are lacking. If you have a severely afflicted throat chakra, then it means that all, and it's indicated in the horoscope by afflictions of Saturn and the Sun. Saturn and the Sun afflicted, especially if there is any Taurus influences, then you have the throat chakra. And if it is afflicted in the horoscope, it will always be a site of enervation, lack of energy, enervation, very important word, an enervated area. So that the surface of that person's lungs, especially the apices of the lungs, will always be susceptible to lack of energy. the person's larynx will tend to be lacking in staying power. The person speaks with a quiet voice, and even though, as I often have to say, speak up, they still can't raise their voices, often an indication of an inflicted throat center. It may be due to the fact that the person can't get the energies from the sacral center up to the throat, and so they can't use voice. We are very, very interested in students learning to use their voices, voice production. Then we say, fourthly, the fourth maxim, that magnetism will not let lie. Do understand that the nature of man's aura is magnetic. If you look at the picture, which is the frontispiece of The Third Eye, my book, The Third Eye, you will see the magnetic aura of a master. You will see again that it is spiraling and cyclic. And we say that the nature of man's aura is magnetic. And the nature of all spiritual, paranormal, parapsychological phenomena is magnetic. Magnetism underlies all these. Magnetism is the energy beloved of the gods. Magnetism is the energy correlated to the second ray of love wisdom. Just as light is correlated to the first ray of will and power, magnetism to the second ray of love wisdom, and heat correlated to the third ray of active intelligence. Magnetism will not let lie. When we use magnetic fields, or when you impose your aura, your healing magnetic aura on an individual, you are subjecting him to magnetic force. And from that moment on, if your healing is persistent, it will not allow things which are diseased to remain fallow, to remain latent, to remain unexpressed. Magnetism will dig anything out. If you have an ulcer deep within your body, in the perinephric region perhaps near the kidney, or in one of the fossa near the appendix, the application of the magnetic field will not patch it over. It'll bring it out. It'll bring it out inexorably. We say that this is true of many magnetic effects of man's aura. One of the great advantages of studying magnetism is that you can apply what you can observe resulting from the uses of magnetic fields. You can apply that understanding to the phenomenon of the aura. And if it's effective in a magnetic field that you can measure, it'll be effective in auric conditions as well. And the purpose of some of you coming to the college rather than remaining at a distance and correspondence is that those who do attend the college will have an opportunity to learn magnetism at a later date. Fifthly, the fifth maxim. We say that man's responses to disease and his responses to healing differ. Some people respond to a disease, presence of a disease, very rapidly, going through the whole gamut of the disease in 36 hours, whilst another person with the same disease may take 4 days. Some will resist. Some will accept the disease. Man differs. In general, we say that man on the path is like a child. Man on the path is like a child with regard to disease. And children tend to react to disease conditions very rapidly. They take the disease on quickly, and they throw it off rapidly. And when you tread the path, you become much more sensitive. You too tend to act like the child, except you be as little children. You cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And so you react very, very rapidly. Now, these matters need to be taken into consideration so that when you give doses or when you apply your healing, you remember that esoteric people usually require much less dosage. If you're using aspirins, the dosage is usually much smaller for a child. As if you read any aspirin bottle, you will see it clearly stated. But doses tend to be much less for people on the path. They are much more sensitive. Sixthly, the sixth maxim. In esoteric healing, we go for causes, not for symptoms. And of course you have to train yourself to think like this. It's the easiest thing in the world to make the first unforgivable mistake in esoteric healing. And that's to say to somebody who is dealing with remedies, have you got something for rheumatoid arthritis? Well, you're talking about a result. You're not asking the person to give you a remedy for the cause of rheumatoid arthritis. You're asking them to give you a remedy for the outer result of it. And that's the most fundamental mistake that people make in healing, is to ask for a remedy for the result. And what Seventhly, the seventh maxim. Where possible, we use natural energies, always in preference to drugs. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes those natural energies are not available. Depression ideally should be treated with negative ions at the most physical level, never mind the psychotherapy. Getting negative ions is not easy, especially under natural conditions. But we always say, much better to use the natural energies of the planet that we evolved in. We evolved as a race in this planet, in the natural energies elaborated by the planet. We grew up in a magnetic field. We evolved in a magnetic field. We have structures in our body that are sensitive to light and react to light. The body clocks are set by diurnal rhythm, night and day, circadian rhythm. The pineal gland is sensitive to diurnal rhythm. Our eyes are sensitive to light. And many of the upsets in our environment lie in those natural fields that I've been mentioning. And similarly, many of the treatments that we can give can be effective from natural reservoirs that we grew up in. So we talk about healing by color, healing by sound, healing by magnetism, and so on, rather than by drugs. There are exceptions, of course there are exceptions. If a person is dying of blood poisoning, an overwhelming infection of bacteria, of course we say use the penicillin if it is necessary, naturally so. There is a whole vast field of healing through the use of natural energies, but it is a field that has been terribly abused. There are those who will pretend that colors are related to certain specific behavioral patterns. Green for jealousy, we say. Red for lust, and so on. Well, generally that's nonsense. We're going to approach that subject in its due place from a sane point of view. There are many confusing statements made. The greatest development in the field of natural healing with natural energies has yet to be made. And we wait for science to discover a natural, provable relationship between color and sound. It has not yet been obtained. We cannot say yet by any certainty that such and such a color relates to sound, such and such a sound. We hazard guesses of it. We say that middle C, 256 cycles, Do, is the sound of the flame red of the first ray of will and power, but we cannot prove it. And one day when these two are related, then there will be a tremendous spurt forward. At this stage, all we can say is that the relationship varies according to the person's rays, as to whether green is really related to the note nature, Fa. The note of nature is Fa, Do, Re, Mi, Fa. Green, third ray of active intelligence, Saturn, Capricorn, Cancer, so on. Eighthly, we say that the attitude towards disease must be very different in the esoteric healer. We say that disease usually results from the inability of the soul to express itself. Disease results from the inability of the soul to express itself. And if a soul is expressing its intent on the earth, the physical body may be subjected to tremendous stress and strain and may not show disease. Whereas another body, perhaps much stronger, may be not expressing the soul's purpose and fall prone to disease very quickly. So we say that disease results from the inability of the soul to express itself adequately. This may occur at the mental level, where the mental activities of the person is frustrating, the mental activity that he's involved in with his work is soul-destroying. Maybe the marriage, maybe the whole tenure of the right life is against the soul's intent. We would say that person is a candidate for disease. Not because he's under stress, we're all under stress, but because the person is not expressing himself. And when you get inability to express, then you get the flow of natural forces through you balked. They get halted. They get taken into backwaters. And you get areas of energy trapping, which become focal points for congestion in physical tissues or for cancer and so on. So, disease results from the inability of the soul to express itself. We must see that in a wider point of view. If the soul has a great deal of karma, it will want to work the karma off, and it will want you to have an appropriate disease that will reduce the karma, if that's the soul's intent. So sometimes the disease is a way in which the soul can work off its karma. And we don't always say that a person must be cured at all cost. It may be that that person needs to be, as it were, left alone somewhat. Yes, and if the limb withers and he's left with a limp, but the tuberculosis is fully and utterly expressed and completely expressed and terminated and finished, well, that's the important thing, that the soul deep within itself is expressed, has got rid of this karmic liability, the underlying cause of the tuberculosis in the leg. And then we have the complementary to that maxim, which is number 9. We therefore say that disease is a purifying process. It is not unutterably horrid and evil and to be destroyed at all cost. It's no good lopping off a breast with a cancer in it if the cause of the cancer lies elsewhere in the body. If the cause is still there, the cancer in the breast, would be pointless to operate on it and remove it. In fact, this has been shown again and again, that despite surgical intervention, despite the constant heroic surgery that goes on, amputation of breast, radical mastectomies, the survival time, on an average, of women, when you compare those who've had the operation and those who have not, I think is about 4 or 5 weeks. So, if you have the breast removed, there's an average period of your living 5 weeks longer than if you had left it there. And when you think of the involvement of radical mastectomy, the horrific operation involved and so on, is it worth it? Just for the sake of 5 weeks to lop away the cancer, the cancerous breast, when in fact the cancer itself is not completely expressed. These things need very careful thinking about, and it's no good saying, well, I like this part of orthodox healing, and I will cut off breasts, I will cut off this, I will lop off that, I will use every conceivable drug to save a life or let a life last 3 months longer. Is it worth it? Is that what we're trying to do? Or are we trying to allow the disease to purify the individual so that even if he loses his life 3 or 4 weeks earlier, the condition is finished for all time? You need to think about it very carefully. The healer's task is to help the patient to endure whilst the disease does its purification work. The healer's task is to help the patient endure whilst the disease works its way out. Tenthly, the 10th maxim. When in doubt, heal through the heart chakra. If you don't know which chakra, if the person has miliary tuberculosis, you don't know what it means, you don't know what chakra to deal with, go for the patient's heart center. The heart chakra reaches all parts of the body, and it is the chakra that the master can express himself through easiest of all. When in doubt, heal through the heart chakra. 11th maxim. Better for the undesirable to work itself out in the physical body than in the astral or mental. Remember that we inhabit astral and mental vehicles for much longer periods than we do the physical body. The soul is already using your mental sheath before you're born. The soul continues to use your mental body after your death. The mental body, from a spiritual point of view, is far more important than the physical, generally speaking. And sometimes it is necessary to sacrifice the physical body in order to obtain an adjustment in the mental body, because the mental body is at a deeper level, and no physical structure will ever be much good if this mental imbalance remains untreated. That immediately brings us to consider the fact that the physical body should be the province of the practitioner, the medical practitioner. Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. Give the doctor the physical body of the patient to heal. Always ensure that the patient has seen his medical doctor recently before coming to see you. Don't make the mistake of thinking that you can substitute for orthodox methods with regard to the physical body. It isn't your province anyway. Only 10% of disease, only the causes of 10% of disease lie in the physical body. 90% of diseases causes psychosomatic. It lies at the level of the mental and emotional nature, and that is your field. And so, recognize this, and you will not get into trouble, nor will you embarrass your own group. Insist that the person sees the medical practitioner or has seen him before you deal with him. There's no excuse in England for not doing this. You have national health scheme. The patient is not involved in expenses. In America, it's different. Sometimes it costs the patient $50, $100 to see the doctor on your recommendation, and therefore the question arises, should you involve the patient in that expense? Here in England, that doesn't arise. And so insist on it. And I can assure you, and I'm not going into it now, that that matter will come up if you are a healer again and again. Be sure of it. Always take into account in your healing methods the recreation of the patient. More so when the patient is under stress and is taken up with living in two worlds. Is living in the outer material world and struggling in the inner world as well. So often the patient will get out of giving you a direct answer and say, well, my recreation is in reading the secret doctrine. Something in that statement is wrong. Reading the secret doctrine is no recreation, I can assure you. And that's the subtle way in which esoteric people overcome your question with an ambiguous answer. Oh, don't worry about my recreation. I'm managing very well. I'm meditating for 3 hours a day. No person should meditate for more than 25 minutes unless he is an initiate of a high order. So be sure that the patient, the subject, has got recreation. They must organize it and stick to it. A recreation can take all sorts of forms. I have no objection at all to most of these forms. Some people might like, if they live in the city, to wander through the marketplace for half an hour during the day. Excellent recreation. Excellent. You can do it each day. I would accept that as adequate recreation. Pottering around, perhaps buying the salads for the day and coming back again, that's fine. Recreation does not mean going to the squash court. It does not mean that you have to see an opera or something. There are different kinds of recreation. Robert Browning was always keen on those recreations which are very like tasks, like gardening, pottering around in the garden. The profession that reacts best of all to gardening are doctors and nurses. They have a garden to potter around in. That's their ideal. More recently, other things are emerging, like golf. The status of golf is interesting. It's changing the social outlook of the country, the nations, tremendously. And it's emerging as a possible field of excellent recreation. We don't know yet enough about it. But certainly any exposure to nature can be very helpful. Now, if you are a farm worker, exposure to nature isn't exactly a treat. So one has to use a little bit of sense of proportion in this matter. But do check up on the patient, see that he is having adequate recreation. The patient should be encouraged to join a healing group. The patient should be encouraged to join a healing group. There are many reasons for this, and they will emerge as we go along. But generally speaking, a master can reach a patient best of all through a healing group. The healing group will take the basic root energy of a master, the fire energy, and between all of them, they will transmute this healing energy, this crude, raw, fiery energy of the master, and they will transmute it with their own rays and blending. And so within a healing group, there's bound to be the kind of energy which the patient needs, and might not get it from one individual. You will all find what kinds of conditions you do best with. I can do very well with depressions, and I do very badly with alcoholism. I can't manage alcoholics, but I can manage depressed people. You'll find that you yourselves have certain capacities which have natural affinities for certain diseases, and others you're not very good at. So the healing group is essential. Get the patient to join a healing group, especially if they're a patient with an incurable condition like disseminated sclerosis. So when they join the healing group, they are flooded with a huge variety of energies, and amongst those energies there's bound to be one which the patient will find palliative. Always remember that the best healer is the person that knows himself best of all. Man, know thyself. If you know yourself, you can change yourself. If you can change yourself, you can change others. Think about those words. Man, know thyself. The Delphic oracle, beseeching man to know the total nature of himself, not only his lower self, but his higher self. Man, know thyself. When you know yourself, you can change yourself. When you don't know what you are, you don't know even how to go about it. If you know what you are, you can change what you are. If you can change what you are, you can change what others are, because you're all human. Think of the logic behind that. Very important. And don't heal from a point of ignorance. Heal from a point of view of understanding. Understanding that the patient is a mental entity, an astral being, an etheric unit, and a physical body infused by a soul, and that all these are susceptible to you. You may not be able to reach all with equal power and strength, but you can reach them if you know that they exist. Self-knowledge leads to self-healing. I always say that we don't understand ourselves as physiological entities until we're about 40. And that I'm saying from the point of view of a person medically trained as well. You really don't understand your body needs and your body therapy until you're in middle age or 40. And then it is surprising how much you do know about yourselves and how you can give yourself therapy, look after yourself. You'll find that by that age you can tell when something is wrong with a fingernail, long before you've actually seen it. Something is wrong with your ear, your inner ear or your outer ear, your middle ear or whatever it is. These things begin to talk to you. Generally speaking, if you are in a group, you should look after the specifics in your body, and the master looks after the deep structures, the systems. If you have sluggish kidneys, then watch those sluggish kidneys with what you eat and drink, the flushing out of the kidneys and so on. But the master will look at the whole mechanism of your auric excretion, for the kidney is an organ of excretion. The master looks after those who serve him, but he expects you to look after your own individual specific parts. That's worth remembering. Remember that esoteric healing is meant to bring unity to the body, to the mind, and the soul. And that's how you judge whether your healing is being effective, whether there is increase of unity between the body, the mind, and the soul of the individual. To unite a person's body and mind at the expense of his soul is not healing at all, at least as far as I'm concerned. What does it profiteth a man to gain the whole world and lose his own soul? So remember the unity of body, mind, and soul. Generally speaking, if you are a person who is orientated towards the will rays, then you heal from the head. If you are a person who has powerful will, if you are generally a willful person, and sometimes the average person cannot tell whether he is a will ray or a love ray, he may say, well, I'm on the will rays, and his parents may think he's as soft as anything and be quite uncertain about it. But generally speaking, you can know that by the time you're 30, 35. Are you a will-orientated person? If so, heal from there, from the outpouring in the space between the brows. That is the source of your direction of energy. If you are a love-orientated person, and would find that very difficult, then an embracing love that radiates from the heart outwards. And don't confuse heart with solar plexus. In the end, of course, the love nature is important. And the most important thing of all for a healer is to learn to love the patient in his totality. The patient in the state of disease, filth, dirt that he happens to be in. Very easy to think of healing as being somebody walking around in a white coat in an immaculate clinic somewhere, when in fact the field of your healing is almost certainly to include poor old ladies and men stuck up on the top floor, not being able to go down the many flights of stairs to get fresh food, and therefore dying of scurvy through living off bread and butter and tea on the top floor. And when you get up there, you find that their toilet facilities are not adequate, and so on and so on and so on. That's where your love is, Callum. That is where you have to face up to the reality of healing. The reality of healing is that it is often a very, very harsh and demanding task. Then, of course, the maxims of old hold here. And healing was done collectively in groups by monasteries, by healing fraternities and sororities, sisterhoods, nuns. And they used to learn, love where you are, love who you are with, and love what you are doing. The three loves. Love where you are, love what you are doing, and love who you are with. And of course, the act of healing is a love token. It's a love token. It is the transfer. I will give you some of my life force. I will give you my precious energies. I can't give you anything else more valuable than that. And that requires an act of love and compassion. And when we do act out of love and compassion, we sound the note of the solar system. And the note of the solar system is one of love wisdom.